Angie. Just these lines to
Welcome to the Vinyl Verdict. Today I have the incredible privilege of speaking with the original bassist and vocalist for the Iveys Badfinger, Ron Griffiths. Ron played a pivotal role in shaping the sound of this legendary band, which of course we believe on the channel, but don't just take my word for it because the Beatles agreed and signed them as the first act on their Apple Records label. And you can also hear a lot of the music of this, which we'll talk about in our interview, on all the different Iveys Anthology discs that have been coming out over the past years. So that's been a pleasure. In our conversation today, we'll explore Ron's early days with the Iveys, the band's creative process, and his memories of working with Paul McCartney and others from that time period. So, Ron, thank you for virtually joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And after an introduction like that, it's a wonder my hair hasn't fallen off. Yeah, I'll carry on. I'll do my best. I mean, bear in mind, it was a long time ago, and I'll do my best to answer as clearly as I can.
Of course. And first thing I want to kick off with is the new Iveys Anthology 4 vinyl. I saw some videos of that being pressed and, Rich putting that out there. So I guess my first thing is your hand sore from signing your autograph so many times on the vinyl?
Well, the funny thing was when that package arrived, I didn't realize there were going to be that many to sign. And at the time, my poor old right hand, I had a problem with it. I think it was probably arthritic, actually, but it might have been anything else. I could only sign so many at a time. I couldn't completely do, say, 20 or 30 at a go. I start, and then my thumb the joint would start aching, and I had to stop. It took me days and days to do that. But I was glad at the end of it to have finished off the whole 316, I think it did.
Well, you can compare them then and maybe see how your signature changed along the way. But yeah, that's quite an achievement, and that's been a fun one. This is now the fourth installment of the Iveys Anthology series. How does it feel to have that out being heard by the public? And are there any lesser known songs or moments from the Iveys that you believe deserve more recognition?
Well, it's obviously the true fans that enjoy that sort of thing. I mean, they're so long, and people obviously realize that they weren't recorded in a recording studio as such. They were all rough demos at the time. I mean, I listen to them sometimes and I feel slightly embarrassed because of the fact that they were so young and we were trying to forge our way, if you like. And the early stuff we recorded really didn't give any idea of what the band was like to start with. We were much more heavy, if you like, live. We were doing mostly covers at the time, but that was the major difference between what we were as a live outfit and when we actually started recording, because arguably it was Peter's bludgeoning years of songwriting. It's Pete's and Tom's, I guess, apprenticeship in songwriting. We didn't know what to do to start with. We were doing all manner of different styles, which was evident on the first album, to be honest. But it's great that they're out there. I mean, I'm chuffed to bits that it's gone from 1 to 4.
Yeah, and I think like you titled the first one here, Origins, right? It is the origin story of the band. And so to understand Maybe Tomorrow, you have to understand all the hard work and the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into these recordings along the way.
Yes, that's true.
So I was thinking for today, I know, oftentimes we tell the Ivy story as beginning when you're signed to Apple Records, but as these anthology installments reveal, there was a long history before that. Given the amount of Badfinger fans that watch this channel and the opportunity to talk to you, I would love to go all the way back and start at the beginning. I've read that you were in the band, the Jaguars, and I'm curious what drew you in that transition from the Jaguars into the beginning of the Iveys with Pete.
Well, I enjoyed my playing with the Jags. It was good fun. It was mainly instrumental music to start with, and then it was obvious that we weren't going to get many gigs just doing instrumental tunes. We dragged in a singer named David Pickett, locally known as Di Pickett, and we did quite well down there. And we were doing a gig in the Dolphin Hotel in Swansea, a wedding reception, I believe. Halfway through, there was a couple of lads, or three. I didn't know them at the time, but Pete and Di and his brother Alwyn were standing there watching me with the sole purpose of they'd obviously seen us playing somewhere or other, and they thought, well, he's okay on the bass. I wonder if he'd like to join us. So they approached me after the gig and said, how would you fancy joining a band that's going somewhere, is how they put it. So I said, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I went along to an impromptu rehearsal type meeting with just Pete and Di. And Pete blew me away because he was playing seventh chords and he launched into the hit at the time, which was Hey Baby by Bruce Chanel. And of course, I was amazed because all all we were doing was, if you like, silly tunes. And I was most impressed with Pete's guitar playing and the singing. And I thought, well, this is more me. This is the way I want to go. So reluctantly, I actually said to the Jags, I'm going to have to hand in my notice. I got a chance to join up with Peter and the boys, and that's how I started with the Iveys.
Mhm.
Although at that time they were called the Panthers or the Black Velvets or anything but the Iveys.
That's right. I read that you might have been responsible for that name, Iveys. Is that true?
Yeah, we after we got Mike into the band, we used to rehearse in a works canteen for the railway men that used to work and live in Swansea. And we were coming back from there. We were talking about the fact that we needed a name. And we went past Swansea Main Line Railway Station, and there's an annex outside there where the taxis pull in, and it's called Ivy Place.
Hmm.
So as we were driving past, the name flashed past, and I said, "What about the Ivies?" to the others, spelled Iveys rather than Ies. And they thought, "Well, that's a good idea," and they went for it because of the fact that there was a band doing well over here called the Hollies. Funnily enough, in later years, we actually did a gig at the Ritz in Skewin, and it was billed as the Hollies and the Ivies. Right.
All very auspicious. And I think, even the timing of when you joined the Ivies, that type of music was becoming so much more popular, right? That the jazz
Oh yeah,
influence, the R&B influence, all of that.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I know you mentioned, yeah, well, once Mike was in the band. So let's talk about how Mike entered the picture. That was in 1965, I think, shortly after.
Yeah, thereabouts. Well, the original drummer we had was a fellow named Terry Gleason. God bless his soul, he's no longer with us. He actually used to work shifts, and we used to turn gigs down because he couldn't manage to fulfill the gigs. So he actually asked us if we would mind if he jacked it in. He said, "I'm being unfair to you lads. Can you get another drummer in because I can't always make the gigs?" Well, coincidentally, my dad used to go for a drink in a pub in Swansea called the Georgian Dragon, or it might have been the Mexico Fountain. And Mike's dad, George, used to play the piano in one of these pubs.
Hmm.
And my father knew George by going there for a drink. And he was having a chat with him at the bar and talking about the fact that, oh, Ron's a bass player in this band, and the drummers suddenly had to jack it in because of his shifts. And George said, "Well, my boy Mike is in a band called the Club Four. I don't think he's very happy with them." So we arranged for me to go over to see Mike and introduce myself and see what was what. And went to his house on the back of my dad's Lambretta scooter. Talk about being a mod. Because Mike was very much, in those days, he still had the quiff. And I was dressed with like a mod. I had the university scarf on and everything like that. Anyway, Mike invited us in. And unlike Terry, Mike used to tune his drums. The first thing Mike did when I walked in, he showed us his kit, which was in the dining room. And he walked up to it and it went, doom, doom, boom, boom. And it was all in tune. And straight away I thought, well, he tunes his drums. He's got to be good. So he came along, did a rehearsal with us, and the rest is history. We took to him straight away, and he was great.
It's amazing how something as simple as tuning your drums or playing a seventh chord can lead to a
Exactly.
lifelong music
Yeah.
career.
It was just amazing because although Terry was an adequate drummer and he was an extra voice as well. We used to do 4-part harmonies as well, but Mike was the drummer.
You mentioned Mike's dad was musical, so I'm sure that had some influence on him. Were your
Yeah.
parents musical in any way? Like, where did that influence come from in your life?
Well, neither of my parents were musical,
Hmm.
except for the fact that my dad had a very complete record collection. And he had a really good radiogram in our dining room, and the bass used to thump out of it. That's where I got into wanting to be a bass player. The bass used to jump out, and I've always had this percussive nature, if you like, and a natural flair for harmony.
Hmm.
And well, there we are. That was the major influence in me.
Yeah.
His dad's record collection, because it ranged from classical to choral to big bands, and he thought pop music was rubbish until a little later in life. He appreciated it as time went on.
It's amazing to me when you watch, all these documentaries and everything, just how quick everything was changing. Music, fashion, world. It's like
Absolutely.
every 6 months, the world looks like a completely different place. So maybe
Yeah.
focusing on the music aspect of that, how did you kind of feel the scene evolve from, those first couple gigs you were playing with the Iveys through to 67, 68 when you became more of a recording act as well?
Oh, that's a tricky one to answer. You just went along with the flow, really. I mean, as music styles changed, we weren't able to play original stuff at gigs. People that went to gigs in those days primarily went along to dance and to drink and listen to the current stuff that was in the charts at the time. So you found yourself doing covers all the time. The actual music scene in Swansea at that time was wonderful. I mean, there were so many venues to gig at. There were lots and lots of bands, and there was a great camaraderie between all the various bands anyway. We'd all come back to an Indian restaurant in Swansea at maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and the place used to stay open for us so we could fill our bellies with Indian style food and all get together and have a good old chinwag about music in general. But the music scene was terrific, to be honest with you, back then. It was really, really, really good.
Okay, so then maybe fast forwarding slightly. So now you got Mike in the band. March of 66 is when Bill Collins comes up to you after a show and asks to manage the Iveys, and that leads to, a whole set of dominoes. So do you remember kind of the before and after and the way that added momentum?
He obviously saw something that we wouldn't have been aware of. I mean, it sounds a bit big-headed, but what made him stop in his tracks and watch us down at Onenford was he liked my voice, believe it or not. Anyway, as a result of that, his main influence on us, apart from the fact that he could put us up in we shared a house in Golders Green, his main influence was the importance of being songwriters. That was his main push and thrust at us. Yes, go out and do gigs and earn money to pay the rents, but your main object in life now is to get your own songs together. That's where the money is in the music industry. If you compose your own material.
That seems like a pretty big shift that happens in 66, right? And we hear on Iveys Anthology 4, we have Girl with the Colorful Eyes, which is your first composition.
I should be proud of these things, but they actually embarrass me. Bill Collins was nagging and nagging. You got to write songs. If you're not a natural, some of the ideas are strange. I mean, one that did seem to work was that one called Tube Train. But that was heavily inspired by The Who anyway.
It does seem like that appetite for songwriting rather than just performing covers came with that shift in 66. So
I would agree with that. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Let's go just a couple months later. So by June of 66, Bill Collins is now recording one of your shows, and we have the pleasure of listening to that on CD, which is amazing. Do you remember how the band reacted to just generally what was their impression of the stage act?
Well, that was recorded before we ever moved away from Swansea. We weren't particularly impressed with it because it was a little bit warts and all, and he'd recorded it, the infamous Revox machine. He recorded it with one microphone stuck in front of one of the PA speakers. So in actual fact, the balance wasn't all that. But, we were pleased with it, but not completely blown away with it, if you know what I mean. I suppose it's because it sounded rough and ready to us, if you like.
Sure. I think as fans, it's fun to listen to it because you feel like a fly on the wall. It's not something, it's forbidden. We're not supposed to have even heard this. But yes, that makes sense at the time. That kind of quality is not going to be impressive to the band.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a huge historic interest. Yeah, something I want to ask. So obviously you and Di are taking a lot of the lead vocals on these songs and all of these covers, and they're not easy to sing. So props for that. But something that's notable is that, Pete is only singing the lead on maybe 3 or 4 of these songs. So how did that come about? How was the decision made of who would sing vocals, and how do you perceive Pete maybe stepping more into the background during some of these early shows in terms of singing?
Back in the early days, Pete thought that he didn't rate himself as a singer, funnily enough. He said, I've got a strong voice. If whatever we decided to do, we all threw our hats into the ring, if you like, to do a song that we liked. But it ended up with me doing the majority, and so did Di at that time. And Pete, he did his share, but I don't know why that is. I mean, the ones he used to do were things like Parchment Farm and
just a prolific songwriter, right? With I think we have like 6 CDs of material now. He was also having you and Di sing some of his compositions, which I think is interesting, right? That he thought you might have captured the mood of those and some of the melodies better at that time.
Pete wanted me to sing it. It was as simple as that.
Yeah.
It was no other reason. He said,
Yeah.
"You'll do a better job of it than me," and that took. That happened to quite a few of the songs. I don't think he had the confidence in his voice early on. That's maybe a strange thing to say, but that's probably the reason why he wasn't as prolific as being a frontman or taking lead vocals back then.
Is it accurate to say that at this point in the career, maybe 66 to 68, that, Pete was more confident in the studio than in front of an audience?
Oh, that's very true. At that time, yes. He obviously had a great creative bee in his bonnet, if you like. He was forever composing songs, which is, it's not news for anybody. I mean, anybody that's followed the history of the band over the years would know that he used to spend hours in that little sweatbox of a studio that we had.
Yeah.
And, well, the results proved themselves.
Did you see a time where he became more comfortable with his stage presence or like with the rapport with the audience?
He did eventually, of course he did, yes.
Yeah.
Towards the last 15 months or 18 months or so before I was shown the door, he was more confident. He was starting to play electric piano as well at that stage, and he was doing the lead singing on with a little Horner pianette. He was much more confident as time went on.
Were you surprised to see Pete step out as the voice of the band with the hits that came in Badfinger, no matter what, Day After Day, Baby Blue? Obviously, he did a lot of songwriting in the Iveys, but so did everyone in the band.
I wasn't surprised when No Matter What came out. Of course, I'm listening to Pete, and obviously he was if you like, the mainstay songwriter, and he knew how it went. It was how he wanted to do it, and I wasn't surprised at all then. I mean, one of the songs that he composed and he wanted me to sing before I left was Midnight Sun, and I couldn't recall. I couldn't do the session because I was in bed with chicken pox, and he wanted me to sing it, but they couldn't cancel the session, so he had to sing it. And I won't tell you what he said when he came back from the session, but it was pretty raw language. Oh, I'll tell you, and you can always bleep it out. He came into the bedroom. I was still in bed, ill, and he opened the door and he said, "Ron, I fucking murdered it, mush." Those are his exact words.
Maybe that's where some of the confidence came from. I mean, sometimes it's pure adrenaline that gets you through those sessions too.
Yeah, I was really sad I missed that thing. What could you do? It was nothing to do with me. It was just ill health.
Yeah. Well, now fortunately, we have the version of you singing it too on that Iveys Anthology 3, which is really interesting to hear how the edge that things were headed in, even with Magic Christian music.
Well, that's what he liked about the fact that I had more of an edge to my voice than what he did.
Yeah.
Which was quite funny, actually, because when we were doing the rehearsals or the auditions for Come and Get It, we all had a chance to sing at it.
Yeah.
And Paul McCartney said to me, "Well, he said, you're forcing it a bit, Ron. You sound a little bit like Reg Presley out of the Trogs."
That's right. I've never heard. I want to hear the Pete version of that. That's never made it out, I don't think.
I know, isn't that weird?
I think we have every take numbered. So it must have been in between takes or something that he tried it.
And there are bits that are missing on that section as well, because the infamous end of the song bass run.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Up until then, we were just stopping dead at the end, like the same as the arrangement on Paul's demo.
True.
But at the end of one of the sessions, I suddenly went, "Oh." I said, "Well, like that, Ron, we'll keep that one, son." Those are his exact words. There's no evidence of it.
Well, I don't think you just did it for the final version, so it must be out there somewhere. Yeah, it's so weird, by the way, just that leaked in the No Escaping Your Love, right? We have the full outtakes of all those songs and nothing else. So hopefully Apple, one of these days, that comes out too.
Maybe.
Who knows? Maybe tomorrow. Too easy. So I want to talk a little bit about songwriting, which, like we said, starts ramping up considerably after this point. On this latest release, we have the only Ron Griffiths, Pete Ham collaboration, which is How Much Is the Sky? So I wanted to ask you, how did that come about? And were there other collaborations during the time of Iveys between you and Pete?
Well, there were. I mean, there's a lot of uncredited stuff. I sometimes would be in the studio when he was knocking something together, and I would throw my idea in, or an arrangement in, or a harmony or something. And for that particular song, he'd started to work on it, and then I was in the kitchen having a cup of coffee or tea or something like that, and he dragged me in and he said, "What can we do with this?" And it was a collaboration. I can't even remember my parts, and I'd have to listen to it again to work out the bits that it was just a genuine, no, don't do that, do this. And
Mhm.
it was just bouncing ideas off each other all the time. That's how it worked. Very, very often we'd be in that little studio knocking things together. I'd offer suggestions, but it never ever came out as Ham Griffiths or Griffiths Ham. Then that's one of the few that did. Even that silly song on Give It a Try. Everybody threw their sixpence in on that.
Yeah.
My major contribution to that was the middle part where we get all those ooh, ooh things going on. The harmonies.
Yeah.
The cartoon harmonies, I call them.
What did the songwriting process feel like at that time? Were these, kind of just satisfying Bill by trying to write a song every day? Or was this the kind of thing that you might write and then work on and redraft lyrics and things like that for periods of time?
Bill nagged me on the, whenever we were in each other's company, he used to, give it a bit of that.
Yeah.
And you've either got the gift or you haven't. I mean, some people are naturally born composers, songwriters, poets, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just, I had some weird ideas. I put them down.
I don't think the band expected the majority of these recordings to ever come out. So it was okay to be experimental, right? That was kind of the idea, was to learn the craft of songwriting and
Exactly.
playing your instrument. But yeah, but when you lay these down, I'm always curious, was it kind of just getting your thoughts down so you can remember the song? Or did you do a lot of takes and record different versions of the same song?
Yeah, now and again. I mean, I wasn't as adept at using that machine as Peter was, because he could get echo out of it and everything. It was just because it was a 2-track thing. It lost quality. The more stuff you put onto one tape, the less the quality was. No, generally speaking, I would probably put a backing track down, and then I'd go away and come back and do a bit more another day. It was never done in one particular session. I'd get an idea. I used to keep a notebook, and I would go back and put another harmony on it or do something like that.
I would love to ask you about some of the other songs that you've worked on that have come out since. And if you remember, similar to Tube Train, like the inspiration. How about Mr. Strangeways? That's one of my favorites.
I can't believe you see it as a favorite. Honestly, I can't.
It's great. It's what's the right word for it? It's quaint, I think that's a good way to describe a lot of those early tracks.
Most of the things I came up with were quaint, and that's a pretty true statement, to be honest. I don't know. Where that came from, I've got no idea.
And what about Cool Me Down was on this Iveys Anthology 4. That's like a little bit harder rock, I'd say, than some of the other stuff.
Well, I mean, it's a pity that it didn't get taken up by the band and made into something, if you like. That's the sad part of it.
Did you write primarily on bass at that time, or
no? I had an old acoustic guitar, which I'm actually in the process of getting. It needs a new nut on it. I'm taking it apart. I'm getting it revamped. I actually composed the chords work to Angie on that guitar.
Really? Wow.
Which is downstairs, but it's in bits at the minute. I've got the tuning pegs off and everything. But yeah, it was generally on the guitar.
That's definitely of historic interest, and primarily on acoustic, which is interesting given some of these songs are pretty electric in the way that I feel like the arrangement was leaning.
Yeah.
And what about, I'll just throw them out, Words With You or Bittersweet Adieu? Do you remember either of those?
I wanted to do something that was a soppy ballad, which is what Words With You, wasn't it? The other one, Bittersweet Adieu. Somebody said to me, "Was that because you were leaving the band?" I said, "No, that was
way before.
Right? Way before that."
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, the one person that thought it was a good song was one of the Marmalade, Junior Campbell. They were in the charts at the time. We used to do gigs at the Marquee Club in London as a support band to them. And he came along and listened to some of the stuff, and he liked that. And he actually wanted to record it. He wanted to produce it.
Wow.
But nothing much ever came of that either.
That's amazing. So all of those are like home demos, because they sound so full. I mean, it really sounds like a rough studio outtake or something.
So, some of them are better than others. I must admit, I'm surprised. Listening back, to 50 odd years ago, I'm surprised as well.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that's all a Revox, because I've heard some of the Revox ones are rough.
Well, I've had that machine for quite some time. I don't know if you know this, but it was in the Rock Hall of Fame. They had it in store for ages and ages, and I made a bit of a fuss you got this off me under false pretenses. Where the heck is it? It's never been shown.
Yeah.
And it did go on display, but I don't think they'll ever send it me back.
Jeez.
I mean, by rights, it's my property, but
Good luck. Very bureaucratic. Yeah. Hopefully they put it on display. That might be the better thing to fight for. So,
yeah, apparently they've still got it. I mean, I forget who it was. Somebody went and saw the actual exhibition, and it was in the glass case, and emailed me pictures of it. And I can't remember who
really?
showed me now.
So we talked a bit about the home demos and the process for those. In January of '67, you have your first, I'll call it professional studio session with Ray Davies of the Kinks, including your song, I Believe in You, Girl. Can you talk a little bit about how that session came about and what do you remember from it?
Well, we got involved with Ray because we used to have shared the house with their tour manager, Dave Duffield. And by virtue of the fact that he used to listen to the demos we were making as well. And he had a word with Dave and Ray. And Ray was the one that was interested. So Ray Davies came along and had a listen to some of the stuff. And he said, I like 4 of those songs. I'll take you into a studio and we'll record do some recordings. So he was the first person that took an interest in and actually took us into a proper recording studio. And that's the first time we'd ever actually heard ourselves coming back on playback through the studio monitors, which were quite big speakers. We couldn't believe what we were hearing coming back at us. It sounded so powerful. And of course, because he was who he was a well-known celeb. He was even then, if you like, a local legend. And we couldn't believe that somebody who was in the Kinks would take an interest in us. So that was a lovely session. That was great fun. That was, and we could just absolutely stunned at the sound that came back. It sounded so powerful.
Yeah, and the Kinks were so influential in the Iveys sound. It must have been like working with your heroes.
Oh yeah, it was. We got on pretty well with them, and they actually invited us along to a video shoot that they did.
Oh.
One of their subsequent records was Dead End Street. We used to have the coffin that they used in that stashed away in our house.
Oh.
And one night we actually put Mike in it and took it down to the Wimpy Bar down in Golders Green High Street. And we walked in with this coffin, and Mike was in the coffin, and we set it down, opened the lid, and Mike got it. You should have seen the looks on the people that were in. It was quite late. It was about 11 o'clock at night, but it got some strange looks.
I feel like Mike was always involved in the weirdest stories.
Oh, yeah,
They're Badfinger. And so all 4 of the songs that you recorded in those sessions were originals. So would you say that's kind of the start of an inflection point where the band
that would have been it? Yeah, that was the birth of the songwriting coming into some fruition, if you like.
That's what it seems like, because it wouldn't have been crazy for a band to record a cover song in the studio at that time. Yeah, so there must have been some kind of validation in him maybe picking those songs.
Oh yeah, the only place we actually recorded covers was when we did the BBC sessions at Maida Vale.
That's kind of a brief respite maybe from all of the touring that continues throughout 1967. Yeah. The next big shift that happens in the band is in August of that year when Di Jenkins leaves the band and Tom Evans comes in. I'm amazed reading about that it seems like that transition happened in just a week or so between gigs. Do you remember the audition process and how all of that transpired?
I do. We were actually doing some gigs up there in and around Liverpool. And we had a couple of nights free. And Di was with us. He actually came along to the actual gigs that we went to see. I think one night we went to 3 different gigs, dropped in on the first one, and we weren't particularly impressed. It was the 3rd one on this particular night. We'd gone to a place called Litherland Town Hall, which is where there was a band on called the Stones. And there was a little fella in the middle who caught our eye. He had a piercing voice, and he had a bit of presence. So in their break, we actually collared him like I was collared at the Dolphin Hotel, I suppose. And we told him who we were. We were looking for to replace one of our band because he's no longer going to be with us. We didn't give him the full story, and asked him if he'd like to come down to London and have a session, come and have a weekend with us, come to a gig which was in the Midlands somewhere, and spend some time with us, which he did. He came down. He saw the gig we did. I mean, Di was still playing with us at the gig, obviously. And he said, I didn't think much of the first set, but I thought the second one was brilliant. He said, yeah, I think I could, I wouldn't mind joining your band. There was nothing in the way of recording contracts or anything like that. It was just a working band.
Yeah.
But he wanted to do it, and down he came. He chucked his job in and came down and joined us.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating that you were doing the scouting. I think Bill Collins kind of made you go look in Liverpool.
That was if you like, that was very, 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 very handy for the situation we were in,
Yeah.
because we were working up there anyway.
Yeah.
And whenever we did work up there, we used to stay at the house that Bill kept the rent up on. He had a house up there, which was a local council house. And even when he moved away back in the early 60s, he kept the rent up so that it was somewhere to stay whenever the Mojos are up there, or whether, as it turns out, we ended up there.
That did work out. But I guess notably also that starts to shift both the sound and I'm sure culture of the band a little bit, having a Liverpudlian in the group. Can you talk a little bit about Tom's influence?
On that first visit down to Golders Green, he actually went into the studio and recorded a little song which is available to listen to somewhere. The opening line is, "We had good times together." It may have been called Good Times.
Yeah.
It was a lovely little tune. And it was obvious that he had the gift as being a songwriter in there. And it proved to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the singing style, obviously, which was so important for all the harmonies that the band was doing at that time.
It was a nice little piece, that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember it right now, actually.
Yeah, no,
I won't sing it.
It's a great song. I'll say I also love Hi-Fi Piddly Poe on here. I think that's incredible. That should have been a single.
There's stuff. I don't know if I don't honestly know if it escaped. He actually wrote one. He composed one song called "Vote for Me in Your Election." I can remember the words. The first verse went, vote for me in your election. I'm local candidate for love." That was the opening line. "There's not many in my party. In fact, there's only me. Trying to win your confidence again." I can remember the lyrics.
Very
as a matter
unique.
of fact, if I had a way of recording that,
yeah,
I can remember the word.
That's
the way
a unique one. And that's, again, you got to keep up with the era. It was the time of the protest song, right? So
yeah. And he actually sang it in a fake Jamaican accent.
Really? Wow.
"Vote for me in your election," like that. "A local candidate for love." That's how he did it.
I think you said that cartoon element, I think I was talking in my conversation with Keith, we were saying that a lot of the humor from the Iveys seemed to disappear once it became Badfinger, right? They became very serious. And I love that humor. I think that's fantastic. Okay, so then kind of fast forwarding to July of 68 is when you're signed to Apple, but I'm sure that didn't happen overnight. And from these Iveys Anthology releases, you can really see the tapes being consistently sent month after month to try to get some attention. From your perspective in the band, did it feel like you were getting closer to a record contract before it happened? And were there other deals that you were looking at that time? Or how did you eventually close that deal with Apple?
Well, prior to Apple, the only option we did get the chance to record a song that was written by Pete Townsend of The Who, which was "Mary Ann with a Shaky Hand." Mary Ann with the shaky hand, what they done to Amanda. We got the demo, and Mike and myself wanted to do it because we thought we could make a good job of it. But Pete and Tom were adamant, no, we're not going to do that. It's not one of ours. That was the nearest we came to getting any recording, because Pete Townsend would have taken us into the studio to do it. That would have been a recording. I don't know who it would have been, but that was the nearest we got to a recording studio, recording contract, I should say. Way into getting a record deal was with Mal Evans. Bill knew Mal from the Liverpool days, and they bumped into each other down in the West End somewhere. And Bill invited Mal back to Golders Green to the house to listen to, he told him what he was doing with us, and he came down to listen to the demos that we'd made. And he was actually quite impressed. At that time, he actually said, "Look, the boys are playing in the Marquee Club in London tonight. Do you want to come along and watch the gig?" So he came along and enjoyed it. He said, "It put me in mind of when the Beatles were at the Cavern, because they used to talk to the crowd and have a bit of a rapport with the crowd. And we had a bit of a following at the Marquee on the night we were there. And we used to chat to them and take the mick out of the crowd, have a bit of banter with them." He came back and took a tape away with 4 or 5 songs on it, and he played them to, I don't know who he actually played them to. Maybe it may well have been Paul McCartney, may well have been John Lennon. They must have listened to them. And on the strength of Mal, thank heavens, they decided to sign us up.
Incredible. And then obviously that changes the whole trajectory of the next few years. I guess nothing changed immediately, right? You're still gigging. Did you feel like, you can't say we're an Apple Records band until there's a record put out. So how did those first couple shows, including Origins 2 is in September of 68. So that's just 3 months after you're signed to Apple Records. Did those shows reflect the fact that you were a signed band in any way? Did it change the dynamic?
No, not at all. I mean, that was just an ordinary gig. There's nothing on there to denote that we'd signed to Apple. I don't think we even mentioned it, did we?
I don't think so. And that's what's so interesting. And you're recording maybe tomorrow, I think around that time, at least as a single, but you're still not incorporating, well, I guess there is, I think what you do, No Escaping Your Love, Daddy's a Millionaire, and Storm in a Teacup live. But those are not public. No one can go out and buy the record. So,
no, that's true.
Yeah.
No, it was just, to us, it was just a gig.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I don't think you even, gigged less. So how'd you find the time to also be recording songs in the studio along with doing live shows?
Well, it wasn't, the gig list wasn't, night after night after night. We'd probably have maybe 2 at a weekend, and then there'd be a gap. There was always an opportunity to go into the studio and do a demo.
Given that we only have 2 Iveys live concerts, it's amazing to hear how much tighter the band is in the 68 show. I mean, it's like you're on fire the entire set. The energy is palpable. The rapport with the audience that you talked about is just noticeably different than even 2 years before. I think the band is just much more confident. And that's probably a result of, all the shows you played up until that point, as well as potentially the inertia that's behind the record deal. So
what knocked us into shape to become a more tight band, I suppose, was the 6-week stint that we had in Germany. Yeah, I mean, that would have been a major plus. That really solidified the whole thing.
Yeah. So then, how did that translate into the studio? Because that's very different than, well, obviously the Tony Visconti production is related to that, but even the songwriting of songs like Maybe Tomorrow and others is very different than the live set. How did it emerge as like, that is going to be our first single? Was that picked for you, or was it a band decision?
Derek Taylor, the publicist who was there at the time, it was a general consensus of the ones that we'd submitted on tape. They thought that was the one that was the most commercial. And because at that time, Tony Visconti was involved with us, I think he had a say in the string augmentation on it. Mm-hmm. People say it was George Martin. I don't think so. I think it was Tony Visconti. But that's how we picked it, because it was the obviously strongest song of the bunch. That was Apple's decision, Apple's choice. That's the reason it was put out.
And did the band feel confident in that decision as well, or? Well,
yeah, we thought if that's what they knew. We thought, well, they must know what they want. They must know what's going to be a success.
Yeah,
they pulled the strings about getting it plugged and getting ready airplay for it and so on. Mm-hmm. And of course, they put us on the Gene Pitney tour to actually promote the band. We had a single spot on that thing, and it was good fun. We went all over the country with it. I've got the program here somewhere, but I'm not going to go digging that out now. This is the program from that gig.
Wow. That is an antique.
I don't know if you can see it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
There's the page we've got in the middle of it.
Wow, look at that. That's amazing. So Maybe Tomorrow is the single. Tony Visconti had huge influence on that, and you're going to be working with him a lot on the Maybe Tomorrow album. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamic of having him as a producer?
Well, he was great fun. I mean, it was a pleasure to work with him. He's such a nice fella. We socialized with him quite a bit. Yeah, he took to me quite a bit. He's a fellow bass player, believe it or not. He's a bass player. He used to like my bass playing style. Difficult to explain to a lay person. I used to not slap, but ping. I used to hit the string down like that. He'd give it a harmonic on top of the true note, I suppose. And he thought that was great. He actually introduced me to vegetarian food. I'm not a vegetarian, but we used to go to a vegetarian restaurant off Carnaby Street called Cranks. But he was great to work with, and he was a great influence, and he was a practical helper as well. He was a great arranger. He's just great to work with.
Hmm. Infamously, the Beatles' first album was recorded in 13 hours, right? Or something thereabouts, right? I'm always
Very, very
amazed
quick.
that
Yeah.
even the first album that the Iveys are recording is stretched out over like months, right? In
Yeah.
terms of overdubs and mixing and all of this. Was that known at the time when you started, or did it feel like it was dragging on forever?
It did seem to go on a bit, but we realized by then it wasn't, Apple were quite happy to pay for the sessions.
Yeah.
We weren't paying for them, so we weren't deliberately hanging it out. It's just the way it was.
Yeah.
If it didn't work, it didn't work. If it needed another recording or an overdub or something, that's just the way it was.
And did you have a full list of songs when you went in there? Or did that kind of change? Like, were there songs that were recorded and abandoned, or
So
songs that maybe didn't work out in pre-production?
we always went in with at least one tune that we were going to do. Generally, it was just the one we were going to do. We didn't have time to do two.
Yeah.
The one time we did another one after we did the follow on was when we did Give It a Try. Matt Evans was doing the orchestrating back then. He said at the end of the session, I think that'll do us. Have we got anything else when recording? And then we launched. Pete had this song that we'd only just started working on, Walk Out in the Rain.
Yeah.
And we did that in, I don't know, a matter of 14, quarter an hour, 20 minutes. It didn't take long. We only just roughed through it quick and he captured it. And that's what the only part of that song I'm not keen on are the backup harmonies that Tommy and myself did.
I think those are some of the most beautiful harmonies you guys ever did. So, hey, that's why we all get our own opinion, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's incredible that that was basically recorded kind of or improvised and not slated for recording.
Yeah, we didn't do a backing track. We just played and Pete sang it and we played it all at the same time.
It might benefit from that because it's one of the most authentic songs I think that were ever recorded, and it's not like you did many takes, so that could be why. But yeah, hitting on some of the other songs on Maybe Tomorrow, got to talk about Dear Angie, which at the time of recording this has 31 million plays. It's Badfinger's fourth most streamed song, more than Come and Get It and Without You. It's also your only composition on Maybe Tomorrow. So is it a surprise all these years later to see kind of the waves that came from that?
I'm blown away. I can't believe it. I mean, I first discovered that figure off one of my grandsons. He told me a week or three ago, are you aware that Dear Angie's had 31 million? And I thought, no, 31,000. No, 31 million. What? I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. And the fact that it's had more streams than Come and Get It, just, I just can't get my head around it, to be honest.
How do you explain that?
Well, you can't. I mean,
Yeah.
the pity is that Spotify don't pay anything approaching a decent percentage. I mean, I'd be a multi-millionaire on the strength of that.
That's true. It's too bad it didn't sell 31 million copies in
Oh,
1969, huh?
but 31 million stream. I mean, yeah, well, it's a sad state of affairs. I mean,
Did you feel like it had single potential at the time? I know it was issued as one in a couple countries.
Japan, it got released in Japan as a single, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was there again. It was a heavily influenced thing. Tony Visconti put the strings on it, which gave it a lift,
Hmm.
which gave it that little touch of class.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I always hope that somebody like Tony Bennett or somebody like that would record it. Or
Were you involved in issuing that as a single? Like, did the band make that, or Apple just plucked it from the record?
no,
And
no, that was all down to Apple.
fascinating. Yeah.
I was pleased and flattered and all
Yeah.
that, but it didn't do anything.
And can you set the record straight on who is Angie and how the song was written?
Oh, that was my then girlfriend, Maureen Angela Atkinson. Her middle name Angela, I couldn't. Dear Maureen wouldn't have worked, and Dear Angela wouldn't work. And Angie was a popular name for a song, wasn't it? So Dear Angie was the way it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the influence, and that's where that came from.
And I know you've mentioned in other interviews that songwriting didn't always come naturally to you, but Dear Angie is just such a tight 2.5 minute song with it, and it kind of changes throughout. Did that one kind of did it just come down to you, or was it something that you had to work on quite a bit and kind of refine
No,
before?
when I actually got the idea for the song, it was some silly hour of the night. It must have been 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, with that guitar I was telling you about downstairs. I was just going through these chords, And that's how it came about. It only took me that an hour and a half, 2 hours to get that framework down. And of course, Pete's guitar solo, guitar work in it was added on when we were doing the demo, we're rehearsing it in the studio. And of course, what really gave it a lift to me is Tony Visconti's production and the strings arranged. They hired in 8 musicians, 2 violas, cellos, and violins. They just get paid for the session. And he kidded them that the first take was a mistake or something had gone wrong, and he got them to re-record it. So we ended up with 16 strings on that. It sounded more like an orchestra than a string quartet, if you like.
Interesting, because Apple had the budget to give you months of recording time, but when it came to hiring a couple more people, they wouldn't foot the bill.
That's how that one worked. Yeah, that was quite cheeky of Mr. Visconti.
Very innovative.
Talking of Tony Visconti, he had an album put out of his productions, and he's actually included Dear Angie on his. He's got an album out there, and he's actually put Dear Angie on it. I know he was involved with T-Rex and various others. I actually messaged him and said, thanked him for putting it on there. Very he said, "Why wouldn't I? It deserves to be on there, Ron." So we'll chuck the bits.
Following Dear Angie and having it issued as a single, did that influence you to write more or less songs after, or was it kind of just?
It should have done, but it didn't. I mean, by then it's getting towards the end anyway, wasn't it? So
yeah. So 69, we don't have any recordings of it, but obviously you toured a lot through that year. The band is growing in popularity, but you don't have a veritable hit in terms of Maybe Tomorrow, Dear Angie. But there's maybe some fans that recognize the songs. Did the audience recognize you more? Did you change any of the set list to reflect the Maybe Tomorrow album?
Not at all. We just did Maybe Tomorrow, obviously, but of course it didn't sound quite the same without the orchestration that's on it.
Yeah.
We gave it we did it as well as we could. Even on the Pitney tour, because we would plug in our new release. Yeah. There was never any strings on it, but even the introduction, I think the violins are plucking. So I was that's the one time I used a pick on the bass guitar for the bits.
That effect. Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
But it worked.
Yeah. I guess the example of 69 shows that we do have are those BBC recordings. How did that feel going into like a BBC session? Did that feel different without having like the live audience in front of you in the same way?
Well, there was never anybody there. They were just recorded live in that studio. There was no backing track and then sing over. We just used to go in there, set our gear up, and they'd say, "What are you going to do?" And we just played what we would do on a gig. Mm-hmm. They sounded quite good when we heard the playbacks. Mm-hmm. There's a few that we did. I can't remember titles, but there are 2 or 3 that we did that we thought were brilliant, but they didn't. They never actually came out on. Well, I've heard them on the radio, but I've never heard them being put out as listenable on YouTube or anything like that. We used to do one piece called "I'm the One Who Loves You" by a band called the Paramounts, and that's not available to listen to.
It wasn't like Come and Get It just magically came right after Maybe Tomorrow. There was a period of time in between where the Iveys were recording a lot of follow-up potential singles, Storm in a Teacup, Give It a Try, and probably Permissive Paradise around that time. That's a very strange little anomaly that happened.
That was a little chance to earn some money.
Yeah, what's the story with that one?
Well, somebody got in touch with Bill. We've got this song. We'd like your band to record it. They sent us a rough demo of this thing. It was a pretty nothing song. And the arrangement was, well, we record it, but we can't be called the Iveys or anything other than, you'll have to give us a name. We can't record it because we're signed to Apple. They dubbed us the Pleasure Garden. So we went in, I forget which studio we went into and recorded it. And it was, in all fairness, it was almost done tongue in cheek. I don't know, I've got the flexi disc somewhere of that. Even that wasn't exactly anything to be proud of, but that's how it came about. It was just a chance to earn a fee. We didn't have a gig that weekend. I forget what we got for it, some silly money, but it was to earn some money to keep a roof over our heads.
The sound of the band, though, on all 3 of these songs is very different. I mean, than Maybe Tomorrow. A big part of that is you're working with Mal Evans now. rather
Yeah.
than Tony Visconti. So can you talk about how Mal was as a producer and that dynamic in studio?
Well, if you like, Mal picked up on what he'd watched and listened to whenever he was with the Beatles. I
Mhm.
don't think he was a natural. I mean, compared to Tony Visconti, there's a heck of a difference in the quality of sound. But Mal was such a lovely fella.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but, he was very enthusiastic, and he took us into his arms, like, so to speak. And he was just a lovely man. And, he was so enthusiastic. He wanted to do well for us. He was pushing all the while to try and get more material, songs for the powers that be to listen to for us to put out as a single. So I had nothing but respect for the man. He was a lovely man, lovely fella.
Yeah, and it was a dream for him too, I think, to be producing and managing
Yeah,
the band. And so
it was his. We were his baby, if you like.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Did it feel like there was a lot of pressure after that Maybe Tomorrow single to come up with something else?
Well, yeah, we were disappointed because we were more or less assured that that was going to be a big hit. We got to hear it on the radio. The first time we heard it on the radio, we were coming back from a gig in Holland somewhere, and it was on the radio. The first time we'd ever heard one of our songs being plugged on the radio, we were, wow.
Yeah. All right. So then now we're going to move into the final chapter-ish here, which is Magic Christian Music. How
Yeah.
did you first hear of there being like another album, and what was the song selection process like for those tracks?
Well, that all came about courtesy of Come and Get It, because Disco Music Echo sent two correspondents up to Seven Park Avenue, and I was the only one who was in. And well, we wanted to interview the band. I said, well, there's only me. I mean, you're welcome to ask me a few questions. Yeah, come in, come in. So I made them a cup of coffee each, and we sat down, and they asked me this and asked me that. What's it like working for the Beatles? And I said, well, we feel neglected and offering different songs, and we're getting them turned down. We feel neglected. The best we've had out of the Beatles was "Do You Want a Ciggy?" So, and then of course Paul McCartney read that article. He didn't think he'd read magazines like that, but he did. That was an amazing experience because we'd never met him before. He came around on a Sunday morning. We knew he was due around 11 o'clock, something like that. And we were all up in Bill's front back bedroom, which overlooked the street. And this little yellow mini car pulls up. And we thought, and we're looking out the window, it's like Christmas. And this chap, Paul McCartney, gets out, and we thought, it's him, is he really coming in here? We couldn't believe it. It was like all our Christmases come in all at once. And of course, he came in with this record, and
Whenever I hear that story, he sounds like the Apple like customer service department. It's like you wrote a complaint before Yelp, right? You put it in, and he comes over and he's like, "All right, you want a hit? Here's a hit." Drives himself, no chauffeur. I mean,
if you like, come and get it was my fault.
yeah, there you go. You mentioned that the band was offered that Who song and rejected it because you wanted to write your own songs.
Yeah.
Obviously, Paul McCartney came along and got a different answer about
So
playing a song.
we just saw it as a golden opportunity. Okay, well, we were led to believe that Maybe Tomorrow was going to be a hit. It was released at the wrong time, and it didn't get the plugs it should have had on the radio. I mean, yes, it's double standards. We said no to Pete Townsend song, but the Paul McCartney. I suppose that made the difference because we were involved. We were actually on the Apple label, and we thought obliged to take it, if you like.
Yeah.
And of course, when we heard it, we thought, yeah, okay, then we'll do it. The tag on to Come and Get It, Paul McCartney said, you can have this song. This is going to be the hit. He actually told us that. He said, but I want you to do two other songs for this film called The Magic Christian. I'm involved in too many projects at the moment. I haven't got the time to give it. If you can come up with two other songs as well, you can have this Come and Get It song. So we went down to Pinewood Studios and watched some of the playbacks of the sections of the film they wanted songs for, which is where we came up with the idea for Carry On Till Tomorrow and Rock of All Ages. And just on the strength of watching those rushes, as they're called, that was the food for thought for the songs. Pete straight away had this idea for Carry On Till Tomorrow. And that's the one song, if you like. I'm thrilled to bits. I'm chuffed. I'm proud. I'm proud I'm on that because it's a lovely piece, and the harmonies are superb on it as well. So yeah, I've got a bit of a big head when it comes to that one.
Yeah, you should. And I think Tom said that that's probably the last one that you were working on with them, right? The last session that you attended.
It would have been, yes.
What an amazing pinnacle to be,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
of the Iveys era and everything, and George Martin arranging the strings. Can you talk about just the history of how that song came about?
it all took place in the studio. You know, I heard a snatch of what Pete's idea was prior to going in there for that, but we knew exactly how the thing went. It was all done and built in the studio down in Trident. You know, it was just absolutely amazing.
And meanwhile, while you're recording these timeless songs, you are still gigging. You're still playing live as late as I
Oh
think
yeah,
November.
we had to do it to keep the roof over our heads because the rent on that house in Golders Green wasn't cheap.
Yeah. And do you remember? So is it still kind of like there's this divergence of the songs you're playing live are still cover songs from, you know, the past year or two, and here you are making, you know, these innovative new songs like Carry On Till Tomorrow? Or was there any fusion of those styles a little bit in the gigs that you were playing at the end?
Not really. We just carried on doing what we were doing. The last gig I remember playing with the boys was very, very close to this town. And I'm in Hemel Hempstead. There's a
Mhm.
little town not far from here called Chesham. And the last gig I remember doing with the lads, and I'm sure it was there, was in Chesham.
And I know you've covered it in basically every conversation you've probably had with Badfinger fans, but can you talk a little bit about the pressure that was coming from Tom and Bill and how that led to your, you know, departure from the band?
Well, at the time, I was the only one in the band who was married. I had a small, young son, little baby, Jason, and I would come back from gigs, and we were on the road. I would come back, and I'd spend time with Maureen and the baby, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was part and parcel of the band. I was doing the rehearsing, I was doing the recording, etc., etc. But Bill Collins he hated even in the early days, he hated the fact if anybody got involved with a lady. Had this stupid old-fashioned notion that if you're in a band, you shouldn't be married because you won't get fans. He hated the fact that Pete was involved with Beverly. Anyway, he'd kept that bee in his bonnet all the while.
Yeah.
He'd convinced Tommy that I wasn't one of the boys anymore, and I think they had a meeting behind my back about, Ron's married now. Do you think he's part and parcel of this band? Pete and Mike said, well, no, we want to keep Ron. Ron's doing all right. And Tommy and Bill had convinced Tommy that maybe it'd be best if Ron was shown the door.
Mm.
So because they couldn't make their minds up, it was two against two. They took the decision down to Apple. They had a meeting with Derek Taylor, the Beatles press officer, and they told him the story. And they said, well, from what you told me, I think perhaps if he's married and he's not one of the boys anymore, which is a load of rubbish, I'll find in favour of Bill and Tommy. So it was a 3-2 vote to get me out.
Very
Oh, there we are.
dehumanizing to
I'm
know
still
that.
here.
Yeah, I mean, after the years and again the blood, sweat, and tears that it came down to a vote is really just. I mean, you know, my reaction when I hear those stories is always, well, it's so immature. And then you think about it, like you guys are 22 years old. I mean, you really are.
Because of the bad feeling, it was a relief to go.
Yeah.
It was a reluctant departure on my part.
Did you stay in touch with the band, and did you ever kind of cross paths with them
I
again?
did. I went down to a few sessions down in. One was at Barnes down in Olympic Studios. There was one song called "Watford John."
Oh, that's only a
I
couple
was there. I
months
was there
later.
for that one.
That's amazing. That's just a couple months later.
Yeah. Well, I was still, it was a social thing. I was still on good terms with them.
Sure.
I went to one with Todd Brundle and was doing the reproduction.
Oh wow.
I got on well with them. Got
Yeah.
on well.
Yeah.
And I wish to God Pete had kept in touch with me a bit more than he did, but
No.
that's the way it went. I'm convinced if Peter Ham hadn't done what he did, he eventually would come back to me. He used to really rate me as a player and a singer.
Yeah.
Pete, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but
No.
he did rate me, and I'm convinced if he hadn't taken his own life, he'd have eventually come back to me and asked me to get involved with something. I'm pretty certain of that.
I will frame it as one final question to you. I know you're
Okay.
very humble throughout and always saying, you know, it wasn't that much, or yeah, you know,
I'm flattered that someone as young as you has got such a a love of the band.
I'm not the only one. I think
Well, no, that does.
I'm one of 31 million, maybe.
It's wonderful. Oh,
Yeah.
crumbs.
Thank you for giving me, and I'm sure now that you've seen on the channel, I mean, you produced something that my dad and I shared and could bond about. And I think that's the power of music, right? It creates this kind of feeling. But from your perspective, looking back, which I know you have to do a lot with the output you've created, what do you think was the Iveys' greatest achievement? An easy one. That's a softball one. So
it's you got me with that. Well, the greatest achievement, obviously, was coming from zero to getting a record deal with Apple. That was an achievement in itself. I mean, all right, having a top 10 hit record with Come and Get It is my dining out ticket, if you like. But the actual transition from being a local band to getting a record deal with Apple would have been a lot of bands' zenith. That to me is the epitome of success for the Iveys.
Yeah,
getting the record deal and eventually getting the top 10 hit record with a different name.
I agree. I mean, I think it's fascinating how you cannot separate Iveys and Badfinger from Apple, right? Even when they went to Warner Brothers later, and it created like a shared fate with the Apple label and everything that came with that. So just want to say thank you again. I know it's late over there, but Ron, it really is a dream come true. I would do this every week, and it's an honor to have you on the Vinyl Verdict. So I hope we can do it again sometime, maybe talk about Iveys Anthology 5.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you as well, and thanks very much once again for inviting me on.